Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shiny, bloody, and utterly unhinged world of ancient Rome. A place of towering temples, epic gladiator showdowns, and feasts where you might accidentally choke on a peacock feather while your host recites bad poetry. It's a land of marble statues, golden goblets, and an empire so grand it makes your local shopping mall look like a sad lemonade stand. But behind all that glitz is a grim little secret. Rome was built by people who didn't get an invite to the party. We're talking about the slaves, the folks who kept the empire running while the elite were busy arguing over who got the best seat at the orgy. So, before you get comfy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm serving up here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who's joining me from across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, sleepy hum, and let's drift into tonight's tale together. In ancient Rome, you didn't wake up with options. You didn't get to follow your dreams or be your authentic self. Your life was decided before you even opened your eyes, by your birth, your status, and whether or not someone decided to slap a price tag on you at the market. Born into a senator's family? Congrats, you're sipping wine in a toga, debating laws while slaves fan you with palm leaves and whisper how wise you are. Born a slave? Well, you're not sipping anything unless you count the muddy puddle you're allowed to drink from after a 14-hour shift. There's no career path, no maybe I'll start a bakery, no 5-year plan. You're either free or you're property. And if you're property, your biggest dream is surviving until dinner. Assuming dinner isn't just a crust of bread your master's dog didn't want. Tonight, we're diving into the life of a slave in ancient Rome, where the days were long, the whips were sharp, and the only thing more absurd than the work was the fact that someone thought this system was a good idea. Let's get started, the slave market, where you're just a discount deal. Let's begin at the slave market because nothing says welcome to Rome like being sold next to a pile of fish while a guy in a toga pokes your teeth to see if you're worth the sesterces. Picture this, you're standing on a wooden platform, stark naked, while a crowd of Romans haggle over you like you're a slightly damaged chariot at a yard sale. There's a sign around your neck, your product description. It might say, Greek 25, knows how to read, great for tutoring, or Gaul 30, strong arms, perfect for breaking rocks until he breaks. Prices vary. A skilled slave might go for 2,000 sesterces, while a scrawny kid might fetch 200, unless the buyer thinks they can fatten them up for resale. You're prodded, inspected, and judged like a prize pig, except pigs don't have to deal with some Roman matron complaining that your haircut isn't villa ready. Oh, and if you're unlucky, you might overhear your new master muttering, I hope this one lasts longer than the last. He died after I made him carry a statue up 3 flights of stairs in the rain. Welcome to the Roman dream, where you're either a status symbol or a disposable tool, and sometimes both before lunch. The absurdity doesn't stop there. Some slaves were treated like luxury goods. Beautiful young women or educated Greeks were paraded at dinner parties like the ancient equivalent of a designer handbag. Oh, you got a Thracian gladiator? Well, I got a Greek poet who recites Homer while pouring my wine. Top that. Meanwhile, the rest of you are just hoping you don't get bought by the guy who runs the lead mines, because that's less of a job and more of a death sentence with a side of toxic fumes. The market isn't just a place, it's a circus of misery, where your entire life is reduced to a bad bargain and a snarky comment about your posture. And once you're sold, your past is gone. Your name, your family, your language, it's all erased faster than a Roman senator's campaign promise. You're a blank slate, ready to be molded into whatever your master needs, whether that's a field worker, a house servant, or the poor soul who has to clean the latrines after a 3-day festival. Spoiler, you're not getting hazard pay for that. Household slaves, so close to luxury, so far from freedom. Let's say you're lucky enough to be bought as a household slave. You're serving in a wealthy Roman villa surrounded by frescoes, mosaics, and the kind of opulence that makes you wonder if the gods themselves live here. But don't get any ideas, this isn't a vacation. You wake up before dawn because sleeping in isn't a thing when your alarm clock is a whip and a very grumpy overseer. You're sleeping in a tiny damp room with a dozen other slaves on a straw mat that's basically a suggestion of comfort. Breakfast? A scrap of bread and a sip of vinegar water that tastes like someone already drank it. Then it's go time. You might be a cook, preparing a feast of roast peacock, honeyed dormice, and fish sauce so strong it could wake a coma patient. but you're not tasting any of it. You might be a cleaner, scrubbing floors until your hands bleed, or polishing silver until you can see your exhausted reflection in it. Or maybe you're a nanny, dressing the master's kids in tiny togas while they scream at you for not tying their sandals fast enough. If you're educated, say a Greek slave who knows their Plato from their Aristotle, you might be a tutor, teaching the kids to read and write while they throw clay tablets at your head. Sounds cushy, right? Wrong. You're working 14 hours a day with no breaks, no weekends, and no room for error. Spill a jug of wine, forget to bow low enough, or accidentally sneeze during the master's dramatic poetry reading, and you're in for it. Best case, you get a beating. Worst case, you're sold to someone who thinks motivation means crucifixion. And let's not forget the constant threat of other expectations. If you're a young female slave, your master might decide you're part of the entertainment package. Your mistress might blame you for it, and suddenly you're scrubbing floors at midnight as punishment for existing. You're so close to Rome's luxury, you can smell the perfume, hear the laughter, but it's not for you. You're the invisible gear in the machine, and if you break, they'll just order a new one. Oh, and if the master's having a bad day because his favorite chariot team lost, guess who's getting blamed? Hint, it's not the chariot. Field slaves, where survival is the only goal. Now let's say you're not in a villa, you're a field slave, working on one of Rome's massive latifundia, the agricultural estates that churn out the grain, olives, and wine that keep the empire fed and drunk. This isn't work. This is a slow-motion execution with a side of sunburn. You wake up in a shack that's basically a pile of sticks with ambition, chained to other slaves so you don't get any bright ideas about running. There's no bed, no blanket, just a dirt floor and the smell of despair. Breakfast is a handful of barley gruel that tastes like sadness, if you're lucky enough to get any. Then you're marched out to the fields, barefoot, in a tunic so ragged it's more holes than fabric. You're working from sunrise to sunset, sometimes longer, under the kind of sun that makes you wonder if the gods are trying to cook you alive. Your job? Plowing, planting, harvesting, or pressing olives until your hands are raw and your back is a permanent question mark. Overseers patrol the fields, whips in hand, ready to remind you that slowing down isn't an option. The quotas are insane. Harvest 500 pounds of wheat or else. And the tools are so bad you're basically using a stick and a prayer. You're not working to live, you're working to not die. Food is a cruel joke. A crust of bread, a sip of water from a stream that's more mud than liquid, maybe a few spoiled olives if the harvest was good. Sleep? You collapse on the ground, still chained, with no blanket to keep you warm. And the next day, you do it all over again. Escape isn't an option. Runaways are hunted down with dogs, branded with a hot iron, or crucified along the road as a public service announcement. Don't try this at home. The absurdity here is almost laughable. Rome's elite are sipping wine made from the grapes you pressed, while you're sipping, well, your own sweat, because that's all you've got. You're the backbone of the empire, but they treat you like a disposable sandal. Most field slaves don't make it past their 30s. Their bodies break, their spirits shatter, and the empire just shrugs and buys more. Gladiators, death as entertainment with a side of applause. Let's shift gears to the gladiators because nothing says Roman efficiency like turning slavery into a spectator sport. Most gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, criminals, or just unlucky folks who pissed off the wrong senator. You're dragged to a ludus, a gladiator training school, where you're treated like a mix of prized athlete and doomed cow. Training is brutal. Hours of drills with swords, shields, and nets, while trainers scream at you to stop bleeding on the sand. You're making it slippery. Your diet is mostly barley porridge to bulk you up. Romans literally called gladiators barley men, which is less of a compliment and more of a reminder that you're basically a walking grain silo. You're not eating for health, you're eating to be strong enough to die dramatically. The arena is where the absurdity hits peak Roman. You're thrown into the Colosseum, 50,000 people screaming for blood, while you face off against a guy with a trident who looks like he's been practicing murder since he was 3. Or maybe it's a lion, because why not? Sometimes they flood the arena for fake naval battles and you're fighting on a sinking ship while the crowd bets on whether you'll drown or get stabbed first. The crowd decides your fate. Thumbs up, you live. Thumbs down, you die. And if you're really unlucky, the emperor might decide to spice things up by releasing a pack of starving wolves mid-fight, because apparently your day wasn't stressful enough. If you're good, really good, you might win your freedom with a wooden sword called a rudis. But let's be real. Most gladiators die young, either in the arena or from an infection, because Roman medical care is basically a guy with a dirty rag saying, "Walk it off." The crowd loves you, but they're also betting on your death. You're their hero until you're their corpse, and the only thing more absurd than the fight is the fact that someone thought this was a great way to spend a Saturday. The rules of survival: keep your head down or lose it. Here's the deal. In Rome, slaves weren't just at the bottom. They were outside the game entirely. You have no rights, no voice, no future. You can't marry, though some slaves form secret families, knowing their kids will be born in chains too. You can't own anything because you are owned. Your master can beat you, sell you, or kill you, and the law will just nod and say, "Sounds reasonable." Speak out of turn? That's a flogging. Disobey an order? You might be sent to the mines where you'll die faster than you can say, "I miss sunlight." Even your name isn't yours. Your master might rename you something like Secundus or Felicitas, because apparently your identity wasn't worth keeping either. Punishments are where Rome gets creative, and by creative, I mean unhinged. Steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving kid. You might be whipped, branded, or crucified. Try to escape? They'll hunt you down, carve FUG for fugitivus on your forehead, and make sure everyone knows you're a runner. Oh, and if you're part of a rebellion, like Spartacus and his crew in 73 BCE, you're in for a real treat. When Spartacus lost, Rome crucified 6,000 of his followers along the Appian Way, turning a 120-mile stretch into the world's most depressing art installation. The message? Don't mess with Rome. Or, sneeze at the wrong time, because that might be enough to get you in trouble too. You're walking on eggshells, or rather, walking on eggshells while carrying a 50-pound amphora and praying the master doesn't decide you look too tired to live. Women in chains, when survival means more than labor. If you're a female slave, your life is a double dose of misery with a side of existential dread. You're not just a worker, you're a target. In a household, you might be a maid, a cook, or a wet nurse, but you're also at the mercy of your master's whims. Sexual abuse was so common it was practically expected, and you have no power to say no. If you get pregnant, your child is a slave too and might be sold away from you faster than you can say family. Your mistress might blame you for her husband's wandering hands, and suddenly you're scrubbing floors at midnight as punishment for breathing. In the fields, you're working just as hard as the men, hauling grain, pressing olives, all while dodging the overseer's special attention. And if you're sold to a brothel, because yes, that was a thing, your life becomes a nightmare of exploitation so grim I'll spare you the details. Let's just say Roman entertainment wasn't exactly family-friendly. The absurdity here is almost too much. You're expected to work like a machine, look presentable while doing it, and somehow not exist when the master's wife is around. Oh, and if you dare to complain, or even look like you might be thinking about complaining, you're suddenly the problematic slave who needs to be reassigned. One Roman matron might decide you're too pretty and sell you to a harsher master, while another might keep you around just to make your life miserable. You're caught in a twisted game where the rules change daily, and the only way to win is to not play, which, of course, isn't an option. It's a life of constant fear, where survival means more than just labor. It means navigating a minefield of egos, desires, and petty grudges, all while pretending you're fine with it. The dream of freedom, a carrot on a very long stick. Here's where Rome throws you a bone, or rather a carrot on a stick so long you'll probably die reaching for it. Freedom was possible, but it was rare, and it came with more strings than a Roman lyre. The process was called manumission, and it worked a few ways. A kind master might free you in their will, usually after you've spent 20 years being the perfect servant. Think of it as a retirement plan, except you might not live long enough to enjoy it. Or, if you're a household slave in the city, you might be allowed to keep small tips or earnings, saving up over decades to buy your freedom. Some slaves worked as craftsmen or merchants under their master's name, paying a cut until they could afford to be free. But let's not get too hopeful. Freedom was a long shot, and even if you got it, you became a freedman, not a full citizen. You owed loyalty to your former master, now your patron, and society still saw you as less than. You could never hold high office, and your kids might still carry the stigma of your past. The absurdity here is almost comical. Rome dangles freedom like a prize, but make sure it's nearly impossible to reach. You might spend your whole life saving up, only for your master to say, Sorry, I need the cash more, and sell you to someone else. Or you might be freed, only to realize that you're now a freedman who still has to bow to the guy who owned you yesterday. It's like winning a lottery where the prize is slightly less misery. Still, that tiny glimmer of hope kept some slaves going. Stories of freedmen who opened shops, raised families, or even got rich, like the fictional Trimalchio, who threw lavish parties to rub his success in everyone's face, spread among slaves like wildfire. It wasn't much, but in a world that took everything, even a whisper of freedom felt like a shout. Rome's glory, built on blood and irony. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Rome's grandeur wasn't just built by emperors and architects, it was built by slaves, and the irony is thicker than a Roman senator's ego. The Colosseum, that iconic symbol of Roman power, was constructed by tens of thousands of slaves, many of whom died hauling stones under the lash. Imagine dying to build a stadium where other slaves will die for entertainment. The aqueducts that carried water to the city, the roads that stretched across the empire, the grain that fed the masses, all of it was produced by people who never got to enjoy it. Every marble column, every golden statue, every victory parade was stained with the sweat and blood of the enslaved. Rome's elite threw banquets where they ate until they vomited, sometimes literally in a room called a vomitorium, while the slaves who cooked the food were lucky to get a moldy crust. It's the kind of irony that makes you wonder if the gods were just sitting up there, laughing. And the saddest part? History barely remembers these people. We know the names of Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Nero, but the slaves who built their world are just ghosts, faceless, nameless, erased by time. But they left traces if you know where to look. A piece of graffiti in Pompeii, scratched by a gladiator named Maranus, brags about his latest win. A tombstone in Rome, paid for by a freed woman named Claudia, honors her children who didn't survive slavery. These tiny fragments are all we have, proof that they existed, that they mattered even if Rome didn't care. The rebels who said, "Enough," Spartacus and the defiant. Most slaves kept their heads down, but some said, "Enough." And their stories are the stuff of legend and a little bit of dark comedy. Take Spartacus, the Thracian slave turned gladiator who led the Third Servile War from 73 to 71 BCE. This guy escaped from a gladiator school with a handful of buddies armed with nothing but kitchen knives and a dream of not dying in chains. That little band grew into an army of 70,000, slaves, runaways, even some broke farmers, who decided to take on Rome's legions. They won battle after battle, embarrassing Rome's generals so badly that you can almost hear the senators whispering, "Who let the kitchen staff get swords?" Spartacus wanted to lead his people to freedom, maybe cross the Alps and vanish into the wild. But Rome doesn't like losing, especially to a bunch of property with attitude. In 71 BCE, Spartacus was defeated, and Rome crucified 6,000 of his followers along the Appian Way, a 120-mile stretch of crosses that basically said, "Try that again, I dare you." But Spartacus wasn't the only one with guts. Smaller acts of defiance happened all the time, often with a darkly funny twist. A slave might accidentally break a tool, slowing down the harvest just enough to get a breather, until the overseer figured it out and turned their day into a nightmare. Some slaves poisoned their masters, which sounds extreme until you realize they'd been serving the same guy who made them clean his chamber pot with their bare hands. These acts were rare. Rebellion usually meant death, but they show that even in the darkest moments, slaves found ways to fight back, even if it was just by making their master's life a little less comfortable. It's the kind of petty revenge that feels oddly satisfying, like knowing the guy who whipped you is now wondering why his wine tastes like regret. Would you survive a day as a Roman slave? Let's be real. You wouldn't last a day as a slave in ancient Rome, not because you're weak, but because this world was designed to crush you, and the rules were so absurd you'd trip over them before breakfast. You'd wake up at dawn, your body already screaming from yesterday's work, and realize your bed is a dirt floor that smells like despair. You'd work 14 hours straight, whether that's scrubbing floors, hauling grain, or fighting a lion in the arena, because some senator thought it'd be fun. You'd bow to everyone, keep your eyes down, and pray you didn't sneeze at the wrong moment, because apparently that's a capital offense now. Spill a jug of wine, look too tired, or accidentally mutter, "I deserve a break," and you're done. A whipping, a trip to the mines, or a one-way ticket to the Colosseum. There's no sick leave, no HR, no, I'll quit and find a better job. You're stuck, and the only way out is death, or the slim chance your master decides you're worth freeing, which is about as likely as a Roman senator sharing his dessert. The absurdity of it all would break you faster than the whip. You're building an empire you'll never enjoy, serving people who think motivation means more chains, and hoping the gods don't decide today's the day a lion gets to eat you for lunch. Rome's beauty is stunning. The arches, the statues, the poetry. But it came at a cost paid by people who never got to taste the wine, wear the silk, or walk free. So no, you wouldn't survive. You'd try to run or fight or scream, and that'd be the end of you. Because in ancient Rome, a slave's greatest skill wasn't strength or cunning. It was surviving the unsurvivable, one absurd soul-crushing day at a time.